In 2024, a couple vanished from a luxury retreat in the Colorado wilderness. Dinner half-eaten, phones still charging. Their car sat untouched in the driveway. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no exits. For 6 days, the cabin was a crime scene without a crime, until investigators stepped into the meditation pavilion. That's when they played the final voicemail. "Please don't bring us back," the woman whispered. That's when the search ended, and something else began. Hit subscribe for more strange disappearances, haunted cold cases, and reality-bending investigations. Because every case starts with what's missing, and ends with what was never supposed to be found. They didn't pack. That was the first thing that stood out. A bag left zipped but unbuckled near the couch. Inside, phone chargers, 2 paperbacks, a travel-sized bottle of melatonin. The table was set for dinner. 2 wine glasses, chicken still warm in the skillet, and a Bluetooth speaker quietly humming static, as if the playlist had ended but no one had gotten up to stop it. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just absence. This made 3 couples in less than 14 months. All reported missing after weekend stays in short-term rentals near Millhaven, Colorado. No connection between them, no shared employer, no common relatives, no known communication. Each couple had booked the same remote cabin property, nestled 4 miles past the last paved road. The kind of place advertised with words like secluded and private and perfect for disconnecting. The owners weren't suspects. They lived out of state and hadn't been on site in over a year. The cleaning service was contracted out. The last person to enter before the disappearance was a delivery driver. He left a grocery bag on the porch and took a photo for verification. Timestamped, 4:03 p.m. Friday. The couple was expected to check out Sunday. When they didn't, the company sent someone to knock. They found the door unlocked, the light still on, and a phone buzzing on the kitchen island with a missed call notification that simply read, "Claire, work." Claire Holloway was the one who'd made that call. She didn't know them personally. Sarah and Will Petrosky, married 2 years, residents of Boulder, but they were on her watch list. Part of an open missing persons file that now spanned nearly 70 pages. Each one a slow, quiet scream. By the time Claire arrived at the cabin, the responding deputy had already done a sweep. "No signs of exit?" she asked, stepping into the stillness. He shook his head. "Footprints on the back deck, but they just stop. And the ground's too dry to hold much else. No drag marks, no blood, no nothing." Claire looked around the cabin, clean, polished wood, stage throw pillows, a cheerful laminated guest guide on the coffee table that said "Breathe in, let go" in teal cursive. It felt curated, like a place that didn't know it was the last thing someone would ever see. She moved to the bedroom. The bed was made. A single sweater draped over the end post, as if someone had changed clothes mid-conversation and never came back to finish the thought. The deputy added, fridge was stocked. Dinner was cooked. Looked like they were about to sit down when something interrupted them. Claire opened the fridge. 2 beers, a bag of spinach, marinated chicken sealed in a plastic container, half now empty. A single lemon wedge drying out in a small glass bowl. "Anything off-grid nearby?" she asked. "Just forest. And 1 old therapy retreat. Used to be a rehab center, but it changed hands a while ago. I think it's private now, invite only." Claire nodded. "Let's check the phones." The couple's devices were still powered on. She scrolled through the husband's call log. Last outgoing was to his brother Friday at noon. Last incoming was a voicemail received at 5:47 p.m. She pressed play. First just static. Then a voice, feminine, steady, barely a whisper, as if it had been recorded from far away. "We're better now. You don't have to worry anymore." Claire replayed it, slower this time. "We're better now." No signature, no context, just an eerie calm threaded with finality. She turned to the deputy. "Have tech pull the metadata. GPS logs, timestamp, cell tower ping." "Already tried." GPS data cuts off an hour before the voicemail was sent, just past the forestry line. Same dead zone as the last 2 cases. Claire looked out the window. The forest beyond the deck stretched long and dark and quiet. Pine needles rustled in the breeze. The wind chime above the door never moved. "We're better now." The phrase gnawed at the edge of her brain. Not "we're okay" or "we're safe." It wasn't comfort. It was resolution. She left the cabin an hour later with more questions than evidence. Back at her temporary field office, she reviewed the 3 open files. The Strattons, missing since March of last year. The Yateses, gone as of November. And now the Petroskis. Each had taken weekend trips. Each had selected the same listing. Each left behind electronics, IDs, keys, even footwear. The only pattern, if you could call it that, was emotional. Every couple had undergone some kind of trauma in the past 3 years. One lost a child. One had survived a mugging. The most recent, Sarah and Will, had been in a car accident that nearly killed them both. Claire jotted a note on the corner of the whiteboard. Couples with trauma bonds. It wasn't enough to build a profile, but it was something. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. For a moment, all she could hear was the last line of the voicemail again and again, sinking just below the level of thought. "You don't have to worry anymore." Then her phone buzzed. Tech had cracked the metadata from the voicemail. There were no embedded GPS tags, but the server that received the message was routed through a local network. Not a cell tower. Not a relay. Private signal. Registered to a rural Wi-Fi router 7 miles from the cabin. Just inside the perimeter of a remote retreat facility listed under a nonprofit LLC. The Clearing Foundation. Claire blinked at the name. She'd seen it before. Once. 6 years ago. A flyer posted in the break room of a courthouse in Jefferson County, pinned between a pamphlet for a women's shelter and a card for EMDR therapy. She remembered the tagline, "Where silence ends and healing begins." The search began at sunrise. State police deployed a small ground team, 2 scent dogs, and a rented drone with infrared capabilities. The forest around the property was dense but manageable. Rocky terrain, steep drop-offs in places, but no sign of an accidental fall. No blood, no disturbed brush, no broken twigs or torn clothing. Just tracks on the deck and then nothing. Claire stood on the back porch of the cabin while a K-9 officer guided his dog down the slope. The animal moved confidently, then hesitated. 10 feet from the edge of the clearing, it froze, tail stiff, and turned in a slow circle. "Losing the scent?" Claire asked. The officer nodded. "Same as the last one. They go cold here, like they just stopped existing." Back inside, the cabin remained undisturbed. Claire walked the perimeter again, slowly, methodically, this time with gloves and a forensic light. The surfaces were clean, the corners free of dust trails or dragged objects. She swept the flashlight over the windows. No smears, no forced latches. All still locked from the inside. She paused by the table. The dinner was still there, plates half filled, 2 wine glasses slightly fogged. Chicken seared golden, congealing in the cast iron pan. A bottle of red uncorked but barely poured. It didn't look like they'd been preparing to eat. It looked like they had started, and then stopped. Something had interrupted the moment. Not an emergency. Not unless they walked away calmly, silently, without grabbing phones, keys, jackets. Even their shoes were lined up neatly near the door. Claire opened the closet. 2 bags sat on the bottom shelf, untouched. She rifled through the smaller one. Passport, medication, extra contacts, a wedding band tucked in a side pouch. The kind of thing you don't forget if you're planning to disappear. She turned to the local deputy beside her. "Has anyone been in here since the check-in?" "No." Lockbox was still intact. Key was inside. Housekeeping never showed. Couple was scheduled to check out the next day. "What about cameras?" The deputy looked uncomfortable. "That's the thing. The owner had installed a security system last year. External cams only. Cabin logs show motion detection triggered Friday night. But the recordings are gone." "Gone how?" "Manual wipe. Local server hardwired into the utility room. All files purged." Claire stared at him. "You're saying someone broke into the system and deleted footage, but didn't take anything else?" That's what it looks like. No signs of tampering, no malware. Whoever did it knew the system. She walked to the utility closet. Inside was a clean box-shaped server mounted just above the breaker panel. All lights blinking green. No dust, no damage. She checked the timestamp log. The last active entry was Friday at 5:12 p.m. Motion detected on the back deck. Then nothing. No system shutdown, no restart. Just silence. Can you recover anything? She asked. Only with permission from the owner and a digital forensic team. We're trying. Claire stepped back out onto the porch. The wind had picked up. The air here felt different, lighter, thinner, like it had been emptied of sound. Even the birds were quiet. She looked again at the forest. It wasn't vast, not in a literal sense, but it swallowed things. Time, noise, people. Later that morning, she drove down to the rental office in town. A small building attached to a gas station, barely marked, with a paper sign on the window that read, "Check us." A young woman behind the counter blinked at her name badge. "Oh, you're the one with the state unit." "That's right," Claire said. "You manage the guest records?" "Digitally, yeah. I forwarded the last 3 bookings to your office." "Why?" "Because 3 couples have gone missing from the same cabin." The woman froze. "I thought this was about just the one." "It's a pattern now. Have you had any cancellations since?" She hesitated. "Actually, yes. A couple who had that cabin booked for next month pulled out yesterday." "Did they say why?" "They didn't. Just left a note on the voicemail." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Can I hear it?" The girl hesitated again, then reached for the receiver, navigating to the saved file. It was short. A woman's voice, shaky, almost embarrassed. "Sorry, we changed our minds. It's too quiet out there." Claire felt the back of her neck prickle. Too quiet. She asked for the woman's name. The girl handed over the file. Dana Marrow. Claire flagged it for follow-up and left the office with a USB copy of the last 3 check-in forms. In her car, she reviewed them again. Stratton's, Yates's, Petrosky's, each one a couple. Each one staying 3 nights. Each one disappearing between the second evening and final checkout. All without a trace. No message left behind except that one voicemail, still gnawing at the inside of her skull. "We're better now." Back at the temporary HQ, Claire pinned the images to the caseboard. Booking confirmations, ID photos, missing person flyers. She drew a red line between the victim's check-in times and the surveillance blackout. The pattern wasn't tight, but it was intentional. The digital forensics team called just after noon. "We checked the server wipe," the lead analyst said. "No external breach. No remote access. The purge was done on site." "By who?" "Hard to say. System's old. Could have been anyone with a passcode." Claire rubbed her forehead. "When?" "Friday night. Between 6 o'clock and 6:03 p.m. She checked the earlier timeline. That was after the last grocery delivery. After the motion detection ping. After dinner was cooked. So someone entered the cabin, or was already inside, waited until the couple had settled, and erased the only record of their presence. It didn't make sense. There were no signs of surveillance inside the home. No listening devices, no hidden cams, no traps. Just a place where people entered and then didn't leave. That night, Claire stayed late reviewing the 3 case files again. Stratton, Yates, Petrosky, all within a 15-month span. All processed by the same rental platform. All unconnected socially or professionally. But when she opened the incident report for the Strattons, she noticed a note in the margin that hadn't meant anything at the time. Sarah Stratton mentioned a grief counselor in Boulder. Referred to group therapy. Didn't attend. Claire jotted down the name scrawled in faint blue ink. Dr. Karen Wolf. She hadn't crossed that name in years. But she remembered it now. Not because of a case. Because it had once come up during Claire's own mandatory trauma debrief years ago, after the Mountain kidnapping case. Someone had suggested Karen Wolf as an off-book referral. For healing that didn't come with paperwork. Claire had never followed up. But now the name felt like it had been waiting, buried in the walls of the story, just beneath the surface. She picked up her phone, searched for the name. The website was still live. The Clearing Foundation. We don't fix people. We free them. The clearing didn't appear on GPS. Claire had to follow printed directions from the retreat's website, which described the route like an invitation to a secret garden. Follow the gravel road to the rusted mailbox. Turn left at the tree with the blue ribbon, and don't mind the lack of signage. You're almost there when the quiet feels total. It felt intentional the way the landscape swallowed you. The driveway opened into a wide clearing tucked between two ridgelines. There were 3 buildings. One central lodge, 2 smaller cabins, all made of untreated wood that had faded to the same gray as the surrounding pines. It was quiet, unnervingly so. No sound but the crunch of tires and the hiss of wind through the trees. Dr. Karen Wolf met her on the porch. She didn't look like a woman who ran a cult or a retreat or anything that dangerous. She looked like someone's favorite aunt. Salt and pepper braid over one shoulder, linen tunic, silver thumb ring. She smiled as Claire stepped out of the car. "You made it," she said. "The drive can be disorienting." Claire showed her badge. "Dr. Wolf, I'm investigating a missing persons report. I believe your property may have been accessed illegally." Karen didn't blink. "Of course. Come in." The inside of the lodge was spare but warm. Woven rugs, clean floorboards, no clocks. The walls were hung with black and white photos. Not people, just textures. Water ripples, mountain bark, cracked glass. The kind of art that seemed to whisper meaning without ever fully speaking it. Karen poured tea without asking. Chamomile. 2 mugs. No sugar. "You think someone used our land to hide?" "I think 3 couples disappeared after staying less than 10 miles from here. The last GPS ping from their phones came from somewhere near this property." Karen nodded slowly. "That's terrible, but not uncommon. People disappear all the time. Most of them are never really gone. Just somewhere else." Claire held her gaze. "And where do they go?" Karen smiled softly. "Sometimes they find places that let them become unrecognizable." She sipped her tea. Claire didn't. "What exactly is the clearing?" "A trauma-centered renewal space. We don't believe in fixing people. That implies they were broken to begin with. We provide time, silence, detachment. No therapy? Some, but not in the traditional sense. We unbuild first. That's harder." Claire paused. "Can you tell me who's been here in the past year?" Karen's smile faded just slightly. "We don't keep guest rosters. Confidentiality is the foundation of our work. It's also obstruction of a state-level investigation." Another pause. "I understand," Karen said. "But if people came here and then left, we wouldn't stop them. We're not a facility. We're a passage." "Passage to where?" Karen tilted her head. "To not being found." Claire stood. "If you think you're being poetic, don't. 3 people may be dead." Karen's voice didn't waver. "Or they may be alive in a way they couldn't be before." Claire left with no names, no list, no security footage. But as she crossed the edge of the clearing, she noticed something else. Down near the fire pit, beyond the brush line, a thin path leading out of the trees. Worn down, walked often, not marked, just used. Back in Millhaven, Claire stopped for gas. The clerk behind the counter was in his 60s, former military by the look of him. He noticed her badge and said, "You working the missing case?" Claire nodded. "You know something?" "I know I don't trust that woman up at the compound. The clearing," he spat into a paper cup, "used to be a recovery center. Real doctors, state-funded. Then this Wolf lady bought it off some shell company 10 years ago. Said she was a trauma interpreter. Started putting up flyers. A few people moved in. Some never moved out." Claire leaned forward. "You know anyone who stayed there?" "My niece went 3 years ago. She had a rough relationship. Said she needed space to heal. Came back weird. Quit her job. Cut off the whole family. Told us she couldn't go back to living the wrong life. We thought she joined a church or something. Did she disappear?" "No. She just erased who she used to be." Claire wrote it down. Later that night, she reviewed her earlier notes. All three couples had undergone personal trauma in the years before they vanished. The Strattons had lost a daughter to drowning. The Yateses had survived a home invasion. The Petroskis were in a near-fatal rollover on I-70. Each incident left them fractured but together. Claire had read the psychology on it, trauma bonding. People who mistake shared survival for love. People who stay because no one else understands the pain. The more she looked, the clearer it became. Someone was selecting them. Not randomly. Not by force. By pattern. She circled a line in her notes. Couples with unresolved trauma are more suggestible. More malleable. If offered a clean exit, some will take it. She hadn't written that. It was from a book. One she'd been assigned during her own psychological evaluation, back when she had transferred out of Denver homicide and into missing persons. The book had been recommended by a civilian consultant at the time. A name printed on the cover came back to her now like an echo in a dark hallway. Karen Wolf, Ph.D. Claire sat in silence. The tea from earlier still sat in her cup holder. Cold now. She wasn't sure why, but she suddenly didn't trust it. She reached for her phone and made a call to the state licensing board. Yeah, the woman on the other end said. Dr. Wolf used to be credentialed, but she let her license lapse in 2012. We've had a few complaints, but nothing actionable. No insurance ties. She's off-grid. What kind of complaints? The woman hesitated. Clients saying they went in for support and came out changed. Memory issues. Dependency breakdowns. One claimed her husband vanished. But that was never proven. Claire hung up and stared out the windshield. Not vanished. Just unrecognizable. The old sheriff met Claire in a diner booth just off Route 6, 20 miles south of Millhaven. His name was Beckett. Late 60s, skin like knotted rope, voice like gravel left in the sun. He wore a faded corduroy jacket and drank his coffee without cream, sugar, or pauses. She slid into the seat across from him and handed over a printed summary of the disappearances. Beckett read in silence. He didn't look surprised. They all stayed at the same cabin, she said. They all left everything behind. He tapped the corner of the page with one weathered finger. No signs of struggle? None. And you think they're dead? Claire hesitated. I'm not sure. Beckett looked out the window. The wind stirred dead leaves across the lot. I remember that retreat, he said finally. Back when it was state-funded. Had a good director. Group trauma counseling. Vets. Abuse survivors. Addicts. All above board. Then something changed. New owner, new rules. No paperwork. Just healing and quiet and cash up front. You looked into it? Off the record. A woman came to me, said her husband checked in for a week of therapy. Came back strange. Mute for a while. Then gone. Gone how? Like a ghost. New number. No contact. Told her he had finished becoming himself. Whatever that meant. Claire wrote it down. What did you do? I tried to follow up. Went up there myself. Talked to Wolf. She said the man had graduated. Said he'd chosen to leave everything behind, including his name. Beckett sipped his coffee. I told her that sounded like a cult. She told me some people don't want to be rescued. Claire stared at him. And you let it go? He looked tired. You don't save everyone. If you try, it'll eat you. She didn't answer. Not because he was wrong, but because she'd heard something like that before, from the grief counselor assigned to her after the shooting. The one who said, sometimes helping someone survive doesn't mean pulling them back. It means letting go of the edge. Claire wasn't sure she'd ever learned how. Back at the field office, the forensic tech met her at the door with a hard drive. This came in from the old Yates case, he said. You wanted access to any media left in the property. We recovered a mini cassette hidden in the HVAC vent behind the bedroom dresser. What's on it? An audio recording. Sounds like therapy. Real lo-fi, though. Distorted. She took the drive, plugged it in at her desk, and slipped on her headphones. The tape opened with breathing. Heavy, uneven. Then a voice, soft, female, trembling. I don't want to keep remembering. Another voice followed, calmer, lower. You don't have to. Memory is a story. You can choose another ending. Silence. Then the sound of something scraping would, maybe, a chair leg. The woman spoke again. But if I forget who I was, who keeps me safe? The other voice. You are not who you were. That person was made in pain. You're becoming someone new. Someone untouched. There was no name given. No greeting. No timestamp. But the tone was unmistakable. Claire knew that kind of voice. It wasn't healing. It was unmaking. She replayed it twice. The last time, she caught something faint in the background. A rhythmic click, like a metronome, or a door latch being turned over and over again. She filed the audio under evidence, flagged it for transcription, and turned back to her inbox. There was a new message. No subject line. No return address. Just a small .wav file attachment labeled simply, "Listen." She ran it through a safe server and pressed play. A woman's voice, again, slightly distorted, echoing, like it had been recorded in a tiled room. You wanted proof that we're okay, that we weren't hurt. I understand. But you're asking the wrong question. A pause. We're whole now. Claire sat back. No scream. No plea. Just that one line said with clarity. Final. Like a seal being pressed into wax. We're whole now. It was a direct answer to the earlier voicemail. Not just we're better now, but we've completed something. She checked the metadata. Spoofed IP. Burned server. Proxy bounce through a small provider in Arizona. Nothing traceable. But it was the voice that mattered. She recognized it. Sarah Stratton. Gone for almost 14 months. Presumed dead. No activity on credit, ID, or phone. But she'd sent this, which meant she wasn't dead. Or someone didn't want her to be. Claire pulled the Stratton case file again. She stared at the photograph. Sarah, red scarf, bright eyes, hand linked with her husband's. A woman who had lost a daughter and never really recovered. And now a voice that said whole. Claire whispered it aloud. Whole? Compared to what? That night she didn't sleep. She sat on the motel bed, reading through the printed notes from the group therapy book Wolf had published in 2009, back when she was still licensed. There was a highlighted line that stuck out, faintly circled in yellow. The most powerful therapy does not restore a person to who they were. It allows them to abandon the identity that survived the damage. Claire underlined it. Then she got in her car and started driving back toward the retreat. Because if Sarah Stratton was still alive and no longer Sarah, then someone had taught her how to vanish. Not with violence, not with force, but with permission. The recovered couple were found 2 towns over in a rented trailer with no license plate and blackout curtains nailed to the window frames. They hadn't been hiding well. It was more like they'd stopped trying to be seen. Their names were Aaron and Leah Yates. Reported missing 4 months earlier after a 3-day cabin rental. No signs of exit. Dinner uneaten. Claire had pored over their case file so many times she could recite the grocery receipt by heart. Spinach, wine, chicken thighs, almond milk. When the call came in that they'd been located, Claire drove straight through a thunderstorm to get there. The couple sat side by side on the motel bed. Clothes clean. Skin pale. Hands folded like prayer. Aaron looked thinner than his file photo. Leah had cut her hair short. Neither smiled when Claire entered. Neither moved. She introduced herself, sat across from them, and started slow. Where have you been? Leah answered, voice flat. Away. Did someone take you? No. Did someone hurt you? Aaron blinked. Not like you think. Claire leaned forward. People have been searching for you. Your family. Your friends. You were considered dead. We're not, Leah said quietly. She reached out and took Aaron's hand. We're not broken anymore. Claire watched the way their fingers interlocked. It wasn't romantic. It was choreographed. Like someone had taught them how to hold each other in a way that would look natural. Feel real. But something was off. She tried again. Why did you leave? Aaron didn't answer. Leah did. We were given a choice. To stay who we were, or become something else. Claire paused. By who? The woman in the woods. Karen Wolf. Leah's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. She doesn't call herself that there. Claire stared. What does she call herself? Sometimes nothing. Sometimes the quiet. Leah looked up. She helps people disappear. The right people. The ones who want to. Claire took a breath. You had a home. Friends. Family. We had pain, Aaron said. We had patterns. Claire's voice hardened. You had lives. He nodded. We don't want them back. Claire stood. Whether you want them or not, you're still listed as missing persons. You were reported. You'll have to give a full statement. No, Leah said, sudden and sharp. We can't go back there. I'm not taking you to the clearing. I'm taking you to a station. You don't understand. Aaron's voice broke just slightly. If we leave the silence, it comes back. The noise, the ache, the weight. Claire stared. That's what pain does. You don't erase it with fresh linens and a new name. It wasn't like that, Leah whispered. She didn't erase us. She slowed us down. Until we could listen. Until we could unhook. Unhook from what? The pain. Each other. Everything. Claire's hands curled into fists at her sides. That's not healing. That's disassociation. Aaron's eyes darkened. You say that like it's a bad thing. She looked between them. Alive. Untouched. Hollow. What did she do to you? Leah's gaze didn't waver. She offered us a room with no mirrors. No clocks. Just the sound of our own breath. Claire stepped back. The room was too warm. Her badge felt heavy on her chest. People think escaping means running away, Leah said. But sometimes it means stopping. Aaron added. We were stopped. Now we're still. Claire left without another word. Outside, the rain had started again. Light, cold, almost apologetic. She stood by her car, breath fogging the window, watching water trace down the windshield. They hadn't been drugged. Not visibly. Not physically harmed. And yet, they were different. Too still. Too aligned. Like puppets with invisible strings. She reviewed her notes again that night, back in the motel room. Listened to both voicemails. We're better now. We're whole. Read the transcribed therapy tape. You are not who you were. You can choose another ending. And now this. A couple who begged not to return to their old lives. Claire wasn't sure what unsettled her more. The language, or the peace in their voices when they said it. They didn't sound brainwashed. They sounded relieved. She stared at the wall above the motel desk where she'd taped up photos of all three missing couples. Sarah and Will. Leah and Aaron. Molly and James Stratton. Happy moments. Frozen expressions. Versions of people that might not exist anymore. Then she added a fourth image. A scan from the group therapy intake form of a woman named Julia Thorne, who'd once attended a session with Karen Wolf and vanished 3 months later. Julia's last note in the margin of her journal read, I don't want to carry his grief anymore. Claire whispered it aloud. His grief. Her eyes moved to the window. What if these people hadn't disappeared? What if they'd surrendered? Not to death, but to the invitation of nothingness. A room with no clocks. A room with no mirrors. A place where grief wasn't resolved. It was severed. She hadn't thought about the bruises in years. Not the purple ones. Not the hidden ones. The ones that lived in silence. In how she flinched when a door slammed, or how her pulse would spike whenever she heard the wrong kind of apology. She'd been married to a man named Eli Parker for 5 years. Technically, she still was, though the paperwork had been sitting in an envelope at the bottom of a drawer for the last 3 months. He hadn't signed. Maybe she hadn't wanted him to. Maybe part of her had just hoped he'd stay invisible. Their marriage had ended the day he shattered a glass in the sink and said it was her fault that he couldn't feel safe anymore. Claire had stood there, bleeding from a nick on her hand, and realized she was living with someone who called pain love if it came dressed as regret. That had been 4 years ago. But sometimes, trauma didn't ring like a bell. It hung like humidity. It soaked into the wallpaper and stayed there. Now, flipping through a stack of archived police notes, she froze. A name stared back at her from an old group intake form. Molly Stratton. The first victim. The one whose daughter drowned in a community pool. The one who vanished with her husband from the same cabin nearly 15 months ago. Claire had seen the name 100 times. But she hadn't connected it to the woman who sat 2 seats down in that same trauma recovery group Claire was forced to attend after the kidnapping case. The one she never spoke to directly, but remembered. Not because she cried, but because she never did. Molly had been still like cold glass. And when she spoke, she didn't talk about her daughter. She talked about the weight. It's not what happened that broke us. It's what we had to hold after. Claire had written that down. Now it rang in her head like a coded message. She dug into the archival box labeled Stratton Domestic and found a weathered notebook that had been entered into evidence by a local deputy who retrieved it from the cabin. It had been misfiled as personal property, not labeled as a journal, not even transcribed. Claire opened it. Page 1. Day 1. No clocks. No mirrors. No names. Page 2. We're not supposed to speak unless asked. They said language keeps the wound alive. Page 5. Karen says our stories are like shackles. If we want to leave the cage, we can't take the bars with us. Claire flipped ahead. We had to sit across from each other. Say our pain. One sentence only. Repeat it. Then one word. Then nothing. We had to eat in silence. No cutlery. Nothing that could scrape. She made us sleep apart. She said the bond was infected. That it had to starve to heal. Claire's breath went thin. This wasn't therapy. It was erasure, dressed as transformation. Near the end of the journal was a diagram. Hand-drawn. 3 concentric circles labeled. Impact. Imprint. Identity. Beneath it, a phrase in bold black ink. We are not our pain. We are the space left when it exits. Claire touched the page like it might burn her. This was the process. The thing the recovered couples never fully explained. The thing Karen Wolf hinted at but never named. Not just a mental exercise. Not talk therapy. A ritual of unmaking. Step by step. Thought by thought. Until you couldn't even locate the part of you that remembered who you'd been before the damage. Claire closed the journal and leaned back in her chair. Her phone buzzed. It was a voicemail, no number. She played it, expecting static. Instead, she heard her own voice. You don't get to say what I carry. The recording ended. No metadata. No time signature. Just that one sentence. Something she remembered yelling at Eli once, during their final fight. But she'd never recorded it. She hadn't said it to anyone but him. And herself. She felt her stomach turn. She checked the file folder again. The back cover of the journal had faint pressure marks. Like something had been written on a missing last page. She shaded it with pencil. 3 words emerged. You were there. Claire dropped the pencil. What the hell did that mean? Was it a metaphor? Or had Wolf's reach touched further than Claire knew? She took the journal home that night and locked it in her car. But she didn't sleep. She lay in bed with the lamp on, watching the walls breathe in silence, thinking about who she was before the noise, before Eli, before the badge, before the girl in the cabin said she didn't want to be brought back. And for the first time since the case began, Claire didn't feel like a rescuer. She felt like a witness to something she had almost accepted once, too. Something that wore kindness like skin. That whispered not let me save you, but you can let go now. Claire didn't call ahead this time. She drove back to the clearing at dusk, past the old markers, past the rusted mailbox, until the trees opened again like a wound that never scabbed right. The compound looked unchanged, serene, sun-bleached, too still. But there was movement in the main lodge now. Lights on. Someone walking between windows. Karen Wolf answered the door before Claire could knock. You came alone, she said. Claire stepped inside. I didn't bring a warrant, she said. Didn't bring backup either. Just questions. This time I want answers. Karen nodded. Not defensive. Not warm. Just present. I wondered when you'd come back. Inside, the lodge smelled of cedar and something faintly citrus. almost antiseptic. Claire followed Wolf into the common room. A fire burned low in the stone hearth. The same black and white photographs still hung on the walls. Textures without people. Claire remained standing. "I found the journal," she said. "From the Stratton file." Karen sat calmly on the edge of a bench. Did it help? It read like indoctrination. Or like unburdening. Claire took a breath. "Tell me what severance therapy is." Karen's eyes didn't move. "It's not a therapy. It's a transition. A choice to exit identity without dying." Spoken like someone who's done it. Karen smiled faintly. "We all have. Over and over. Every time we reinvent ourselves to survive, we leave someone behind." Claire's jaw tightened. "You isolate people. You separate couples. You strip them of language and context. That's not reinvention. That's coercion." Karen's voice was steady. "No one is forced to stay. They arrive damaged, bonded to their pain, wrapped in loops they can't escape. We give them a quiet place to unravel." "You mean erase themselves?" "Not erase. Sever." Claire stared at her. "Do you even hear yourself?" "I do. And I know what I'm saying sounds monstrous to people who've never begged to disappear." The room was too quiet. Claire glanced toward the hallway. "Where's your partner?" Karen didn't blink. "He's here." A moment later, a man stepped out from the hallway. Tall, late 40s, quiet eyes, t-shirt, work jeans, hands lightly stained with soil. Not a therapist. Not an officer. Caretaker. "Levi Brooks," Claire said. He nodded. "We've spoken before." Briefly. She searched her memory. Came up short. Karen offered clarification. "He was part of my group therapy program before the retreat opened. He was one of the first to finish the severance." "You mean he was your patient?" "No," Levi said. "I was a volunteer." Claire turned to him. "And now, I help keep the place clean. Is that what you call scrubbing GPS data? Or staging the Yates' disappearance?" Levi didn't flinch. "They asked us to help them disappear. We didn't force them. We facilitated their decision." "That's obstruction." Karen stood. "Is it? When someone in an abusive marriage changes their name and vanishes with court protection, is that obstruction? When someone checks into a silent monastery for 6 months, is that abandonment? Or is that survival?" "You're not a monastery." "No," she said. "We're the threshold. Nothing more." Claire's voice dropped. "And Molly Stratton?" Karen's face softened. "She left long before she arrived. She and her husband were listed as dead. A car found burned. 2 bodies. You helped them fake that." Levi spoke then, calmly. "No, they faked it themselves. We just didn't stop them." Claire's pulse ticked. "You're saying Molly and James are alive?" Karen tilted her head. "They're free. It's not the same thing." Claire stepped forward. "Do you know where they are?" "No." "Would you tell me if you did?" Karen didn't answer. Claire looked between them. "You call it severance. But all I see are people with trauma being offered a void. A silence you dress up as healing." Karen's expression shifted. Not anger. Pity. "You still think pain defines people. That healing means rebuilding the damaged structure. But sometimes the house is unsalvageable. You tear it down. You live in the clearing where it stood." Claire stared. "You're not offering peace. You're offering amnesia." Karen met her gaze. "And what if that's kinder than memory?" There was nothing left to say. Claire left the lodge without a warrant. Without proof. Without the couple she'd been chasing for over a year. But her hands shook as she reached the car. Because deep down, part of her understood. Not the logic. Not the method. But the craving. The need to step off the map. To stop being the shape of her old wounds. The only difference was that she'd never been offered a way out. Until now. The tape wasn't labeled. It was buried in a cracked plastic bin at the back of the evidence locker. Catalogued only as unofficial recording. Case link unverified. No one had flagged it. No one had listened past the first few seconds. Claire did. The audio opened with sobbing. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. just raw, muffled. I don't want to be fixed. The woman's voice cracked mid-word. There was something wrong in the breath that followed. A broken rhythm. Not panic, resignation. Claire closed her eyes. I want to stay angry. I want to stay mine. Silence. Then Karen Wolf's voice, quiet and slow, barely above a whisper. Anger is memory protecting itself. If you let go of the shape, the hurt won't need a name anymore. The woman tried to speak again. Something hit the floor, a chair leg or a cup. She was crying harder now. No, I didn't say yes. Karen, still soft. You did. You just didn't know it yet. Claire stopped the tape. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't a session. This wasn't therapy. It was grooming. It was control. The date stamp on the file metadata marked it just 6 days before Emily Rhodes was reported missing. A woman Claire had never been able to tie directly to the clearing, until now. A local waitress. No known partner. No disappearance that matched the others. Just a file that never closed. A sister who wouldn't stop calling. And a note in the report that Emily had been emotionally vulnerable following a breakup and seeking counseling options. Claire had missed it. Everyone had. But now Wolf's process wasn't just theoretical. It was traceable. Claire drove up to the retreat one last time, alone again. She didn't stop at the lodge. She followed the narrow path behind the fire pit. The one she'd seen before but never walked. The ground here was soft. Pine needles layered like paper. The smell of earth thick and wet from rain. About 30 feet in, the trail curved around a large rock formation, and then dipped. It wasn't much. A shallow depression in the soil. But the air changed. Went sour. Something was buried here. Claire got on her knees and started digging. The soil turned darker 2 inches down. Then looser. Then something caught her glove. A soft give, fabric covered. She uncovered the shape of a jacket. Denim. Faded. Still zipped. Beneath it, the arm. Pale. Twisted. Attached to a woman. Claire stepped back. She called it in. 10 minutes later, she was standing over a temporary floodlight, watching a forensic team lift what was now officially a body from the forest floor. Female. 20s. No visible trauma. Dental confirmed her 2 days later as Emily Rhodes. Claire didn't speak when they gave her the report. She just sat with the coroner's notes in one hand and the therapy tape in the other. Emily had said no. Karen had rephrased it as yes. And no one had stopped it. Until now. She returned to the lodge that evening. Wolf opened the door as if she'd been expecting her. Claire didn't step inside. She just handed her the photo. Emily Rhodes, 19. Local. Alone. Karen looked at the picture. Her face didn't change. She didn't finish, she said. She didn't survive. Karen's voice was quiet. Some people go too deep. They try to tear it all out at once. But the pain's braided into the spine. You pull too hard. It breaks something else. Claire stared. You talk like this is surgery. It's not. You played doctor and someone died. Karen's eyes lowered. I tried to help her let go. She begged to forget. She begged to stay angry. Karen said nothing. Claire felt heat behind her eyes but didn't let it surface. You said no one's forced. That severance was a choice. It is. Not when they're fractured. Not when you use grief as a scalpel. Karen looked past her, toward the trees. I didn't kill her, she said. She walked into the quiet. I just let her. Claire stepped back. You're not a healer. You're an eraser. Karen's voice stayed calm. And yet they keep coming. Claire left without saying more. But this time she took something with her. A file. Copied, not stolen. Hidden in plain sight. Inside it, a list of initials, dates, session notes, and one final page and signed, but written in the same ink as Molly Stratton's journal. The last step of severance isn't forgetting. It's refusing to be remembered. Claire read it twice. Then she slid the file into her satchel, locked the motel door behind her, and sat in the dark, wondering how many people she'd been chasing had never wanted to be found, and how many more were still waiting to disappear the right way. The clearing was shut down 3 days after the body was found. No arrests, No dramatic standoff. Just a cease and desist order from the State Health Board and a property seizure filed under zoning violations and unlicensed psychological care. Wolf didn't fight it. She signed the paperwork, walked the property one last time, locked the lodge doors behind her and handed the key to a deputy without saying a word. Levi Brooks vanished that same morning. No forwarding address. No utility records. No vehicle seen leaving the compound. Gone. The official language was quiet. Closure due to noncompliance. No mention of severance therapy. No mention of the dead girl in the woods. Claire had sent the autopsy to the DA, but Wolf's involvement was too indirect. Too abstract. It wouldn't stick. So Claire submitted the report. Redacted. Clean. Restrained. She left out the recordings. The journals. The names of people who didn't want to be named. She called it an unauthorized retreat practicing fringe behavioral therapy. She left out the word cult. Not because she didn't believe it, because she couldn't prove it without unraveling people who wanted to stay unraveled. The day after her report was filed, she found an envelope taped to her motel room door. No address, just her name, written in careful cursive. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Thank you for not bringing us back. M. Claire read it 3 times. Molly Stratton. She was alive. Somewhere. Watching the investigation close. Maybe she had a new name now. A new state. A quiet life. Claire didn't report it. She put the letter in her wallet and left the motel 2 hours later. Back at her field office, she checked in on Aaron and Leah Yates. They'd been placed in temporary housing. A social worker had arranged trauma therapy, jobs, slow reintegration. Claire had visited them once since, just to check. Leah had smiled, worn makeup, said all the right things. But now she was gone. Vanished 2 days after the letter arrived. Left the apartment with a packed bag, took a car that wasn't hers, and turned off her phone outside county lines. Aaron hadn't reported it. He just said, she was always going to go back. Claire stared at him. To Wolf. To the place, he said quietly. Not the person. He wouldn't say more. That night, Claire opened the file again and stared at the last phrase in Molly's journal. We are not our pain. We are the space left when it exits. She had spent over a year chasing ghosts. Now she realized they'd never been running. They had been stepping out of themselves. And some of them liked the emptiness better. She looked at the board in front of her. The faces, the red thread, the lines between names. 3 were crossed out. Found. Alive. Changed. 2 were still missing. 1 was dead. But the math didn't tell the story. Because not all the lost were lost against their will. And not all the found stayed found. Claire didn't go back to Denver right away. She stayed in Millhaven a few extra days. Not for the case. Not for paperwork. Just to sit. The air up here was different. It didn't move the same way. She found herself listening for things. A footstep on gravel. A door creaking open. A voice calling from deep in the trees. But all she heard was wind. And silence. The cabin had been reclaimed. Cleaned. Listed again on the rental site with updated photos and a cheery caption. Recharged and ready for your next escape. She scrolled past it without reacting. That night, in the quiet of her motel room, she opened her phone. There was 1 voicemail left. The last one. She'd saved it out of habit. Out of duty. She played it once more. You don't have to keep looking. We're not lost. We just chose something else. A long pause. You asked what healing is? This. Claire stared at the screen. Then she held her finger over the file. Pressed delete. Watched it vanish without fanfare. No backup. No forensic trace. Gone. She didn't report it. Didn't mention it in the final interview with the DA. Didn't log it in the missing persons database. She just let it go. Because something had shifted in her, not in belief but in certainty. She had started this case chasing the idea that all disappearances were accidents. Or crimes. That every lost person wanted to be found. Now she knew better. Some people weren't hiding. They were shedding. She thought about the journal pages. The therapy recordings. The look in Aaron Yates's eyes when he said she was always going to go back. They weren't broken anymore. They were empty, and for some that was the point. Claire left Millhaven the next morning. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Didn't file for a follow-up task force. Just closed the door behind her and drove. No music. No calls. Just the road. And the sound of tires carving through early mist. She didn't know where Molly was, or Leah, or Levi, or the others whose initials filled Wolf's silent little files. But she knew this. If they wanted to be found, they wouldn't have vanished so cleanly. And if they didn't, then she wasn't the one to drag them back. Later that month, she received a small envelope in her Denver office inbox. No return address. No note. Inside, a pressed leaf. Pine. Glossed. Laminated. Nothing else. No message. But Claire knew what it meant. She slid it into the back of her notebook. Didn't tell anyone. She sat at her desk. Badge beside her coffee. Window open just enough to hear the wind. No photos on the wall. No old voicemail reminders. Just the quiet. And the space where the noise had once been.